Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's lunch and learn session where we have Patrick Jermann as a speaker. Today we'll hear more about the use of Piazza as a forum for collaborative learning, feedback, and some preliminary data Patrick has on it, and some further plans on how we would like to use Piazza at the PFL.
So here we go. So actually, thanks for coming. And the presentation was initially entitled Piazza, and I renamed it Forums from 2005 to 2022, because I will give you a little bit of context about why we talk about Piazza today and how the story behind using forums at EPFL for education, what was this history. And let me start first by why do we think that forums are useful for learning? So you probably have seen this slide before. It's a chart that shows the effect sizes of different educational interventions. And the efficiency of such an intervention is measured by what we call the effect size. So for those who don't know, the effect size is how many standard deviations is your intervention contributing to the learning score, for example. And the average effect size for any educational intervention is in average 0.4, and some stuff works better than others. And among those, two are especially interesting for forums. One is cooperative learning, the idea that you learn better in a group than alone, and forums are really by essence allowing people to interact, explain stuff to each other. And that's a bit the socio-constructivist side of myself who is happy about this. And then the behaviorist side is also there because feedback also helps a lot to learn when feedback is given to students or to teachers. And forums can actually be used for both. So in a forum, you can have a social construction of knowledge because you exchange point of views and you discuss, and feedback is more in the form of you ask a question and the teacher gives you feedback, or a peer gives you feedback about some aspects you might not have understood. So that's all good. It's stuff we have been advocating for the past 20 years. And I found the slide I presented in 2008, lessons learned about Moodle at EPFL. So at that time, we just installed Moodle 3 years ago. We had one forum in each course, so 900 forums in total. And there were only 1,434 posts in these 1,000 forums. So basically, we created a forum per default in each course. And most of them, the vast majority, did not have any discussion going on. And it's been like this until 2020. So in general, Moodle forums don't work at EPFL because it's a presence university. If a student has a question, they go and meet the teachers during the break. Sometimes teachers don't follow up questions because it requires some work to monitor the forum and give answers. And also students tend to forget it and want to look into the future, but that was not so long ago. And if you look at the cycle of innovation management in a university, this is like yesterday. And how did we react actually to the COVID stuff? Everyone had to move online, and there was experimentation with many different tools, either to deliver the lectures or to conduct discussions. And so there was use of Piazza, Slack, Discord, OKNoName, and Microsoft Teams, and many other tools. So one of the tools that we recommended in Central is called Piazza. And for those who don't know how it looks, here is a snapshot. So on the left side here, you have the list of messages that were posted. And here you have messages, a question, a student answer, and the instructor feedback to that answer. And it's quite well done. The general procedure for let's say the workflow goes like this. The student posts a question. In Piazza, what's original is that several students can collaboratively build an answer, and then a teaching assistant can either validate a student's answer or can provide an answer themselves. And then at the end, you can decide, oh, this question is resolved. So that's a bit original discussion format in Piazza. And that's the tool we have been using and documenting. So I don't expect you to copy these URLs now. You can have them in the slides later, but we developed during COVID a series of quick start guides and use cases about how one teacher is using it to do a hybrid classroom. For example, half of the people are online, some are in the classroom, and how can you use Piazza to serve as a mediation tool between the two audiences. We also did a teacher survey during COVID and asked them, you know, you've been teaching online in hybrid for a semester, what has worked well and not well? And in the positive aspect, so we looked at the comments they gave. Out of 300 comments, 12% were about the forums and chats. So not everyone comments this as being great. Videos were much more popular, but let's say they are still here. But what everyone commented as being very negative is the lack of contact between teachers and students. So we were in a situation where tools had to fill in for this lack of contact and allow students and teachers to interact with each other. We also asked the students about what you think is important for learning. And the third element, the third most popular element they mentioned was to be able to ask questions. But then only some students identified working with peers as being something important. So the feedback part seemed to be more important for students, and the collaborative learning was mentioned only by 4% of the students in their comments. So then we continued our, what now? The pandemic will soon be over, and the AVPE created a commission called the Hybrid Commission that was working on what are we going to keep after the COVID? What worked well, and what do we want to keep for the future? And here you see a series of recommendations. Recommendation 3 was about promoting asynchronous feedback, which is precisely this idea of having tools that allow interaction outside of the lecture and exercise sessions, and that can help students get feedback. And very concretely, when you get to put this into action, it means, we should have Piazza. So that's one Piazza or something else. And so this is today. All that stuff is behind us, and we're back on campus. And actually, we can ask, are we really back on campus? And there is recent data we have collected. These slides are from Pierre Dillembourg, thanks to him to share. We looked in the classrooms 2 weeks ago, how many students were attending the lectures. And this is a list of 23 courses with the percentage of attendance. So here you had, out of 172 students, only 5% were in class. And here, out of 138, you had 70% attendance. What you see from this graph is that 80% of the courses have less than 50% attendance. So students are not in the class. Remember, at the end of the pandemic, everyone wanted to come back on campus. And so at least they don't sit in the class, but they are still on campus. This is the number of IP connections registered on campus. Before COVID, here, you look at the routers and the Wi-Fi connections, then you have lockdown, everyone's at home, then we have the théâtre of all the possible combinations of at home or on campus, and then we're back to normal. So students actually come to campus, but don't necessarily go to class. And when you ask the students, are you coming to class or not? And are you coming to the exercises? You have only 50% or so who say, I come often or always to class. And 40% who say, I come often or always to the exercises. Of course, travaux pratiques, practical labs, you have a big proportion of people coming because the only way to get a grade out of a travaux pratiques is to go there and do the manipulations. We also asked, are you attending class and exercises more or less than before the pandemic? And here you see 60% say less than before. So the context is changing a bit. Maybe we're moving towards a more flexible environment for learning, where, as we do as professionals, we like to be at home on Fridays, writing emails on the terrace. Maybe students also take a bit opportunities for flexibility. And this is maybe also something to take into account when we think about asynchronous interactions between teachers and students. So, yeah.
What's the difference between travaux pratiques and exercices?
Exercise is the recitation sessions where you solve exercises on paper. And travaux pratiques is you go in a lab with a microscope and you look at the stuff. So simplification, but that's the idea.
Okay, thank you.
So in French, we say la question à 1000 balles, you know, the $1 million question. Offer is here to stay. So here you have the number of students who enroll in Piazza before pandemic. So we had a few people using it in 2017 already. It was not used much, a bit like Moodle forums. And then bam, COVID starts. And all of a sudden we have 4,000 students, unique students who use it during a semester. The September semester is always a bit more populated than the spring semester. That's maybe an explanation why it goes down. And now yesterday evening at 10 o'clock, I received the data for 2022. And here is how it looks. So the surprise is that even when we're back on campus, the use of Piazza continues in a quite similar fashion as what was the case during the pandemic. Okay, so that's an interesting sign that things are continuing. And so I dug a bit more to see who is using Piazza. And so here, each Piazza has a course code like math 1, 2, 3. And so I extract the first part of the course code to have math, computer science, physics, mechanical engineering, Syscom, etc. And so the big users are mathematics and computer science courses, and the 3 follow-ups are physics, mechanical engineering, and com. Then if you look at the course level and you take the first digit of the course code, you have an indication of the level of the course. Is it an introduction course or does it come later? And here you have the heat map. So it's used a lot in 1 and 2 courses, a little bit in 3 and 4, so math or CS 411, for example, and then much less during 5, 6, 7, which are more advanced, probably also smaller courses, doctoral level courses where you have 5 people sitting in a room. There you don't really need a forum. So people were telling me, are we going to have Piazza, yes or no? We need to purchase it and so on. And so before choosing Piazza, really, I interviewed 7 professors in math, physics, and engineering. I chose the ones who use Piazza a lot. And I asked them, you know, how did it go? What are the different aspects that are important in Piazza in order to come up with a list of features? And to the question, how did it go? They were really enthusiastic about the participation of the students in class. So here I plotted the histogram of the number of contribution. A contribution is you write something in the forum. And so you see many students don't contribute at all. they just come to look at the course. But then still you have quite some who write maybe 10 messages. And then you have some students who are really involved in the forums. And some professors told me that was really cool because a few students were very reactive, answering to other people's questions. And those I recruited as a TA for the next class. So you have some, yeah, exactly. So that's it. Some people are very active. Another interesting thing is this idea that some people work together on answers. Very often in forums, when you read old literature, you have these discussion threads that have only one post and nobody answers. And here I computed the level of elaboration, which is how many contributions divided by the number of posts. So one post is one thread and a contribution is a message in this thread. And we get a mean of 3. So every discussion has, in average, 3 components. And that's quite interesting, and I think it's quite high compared to what we were looking at in Moodle in the previous years. And that gives me the impression that this Piazza model of encouraging people to answer each other has some effect. Here I'm counting courses. So in some courses, it's low. In some courses, it's much higher. What is interesting as a next step is also to look at what were the instructions from the teachers to the students to increase this number? Or is it depending on the type of content, the type of questions that are posted? But this would require a little bit a deeper dive into the qualitative aspects of the data. Another one, which is interesting, is if you have 100 students in your class, how many are posting something? And the average is 39%, which is huge compared to MOOCs, for example. In a MOOC, you have 3% of the people who post something in the message. Here you have 40%. And I think one of the key elements to explain this is anonymity in the participation. And that was cited quite often also by the teachers as a key feature, which is better in Piazza compared to Moodle. In large classes, it can be a bit, say, un peu dangereux, you know, to ask stupid questions and so on. And if you can be anonymous, it encourages participation. And then the last aspect that was cited is LaTeX. Of course, we're an engineering school, and so people need to learn how to write mathematical expressions because it will be useful for your later life. And it's also useful outside of math. So even computer science people use it to describe algorithms and so on. So at that point, I got enough to start writing a call for tender. So write the specifications to be able to purchase a discussion system. That's a bit a problem because ideally we would have said, let's just continue using Piazza. But the laws that govern purchasing by a public institution force us to make a call for tender at a certain point when the cost for the system is over a given amount. So I've been looking at different types of systems. I took Moodle as a comparison. You cannot have categories for posts. You can't have a live discussion. You cannot be anonymous. So that's not satisfactory. And I currently, we launched the call for tender today for Piazza, EdSTEM, and OKNoName. I discovered EdSTEM not long ago. It's a Piazza alternative that looks more modern, does a little bit more even than Piazza, I think. And then OKNoName is a startup who developed this at EPFL, and it's a system that is used in IC in a few courses. So this is underway. The danger, of course, in terms of user adoption is that we don't end up with Piazza. So it's possible that by the end of August, we have to write new documentation for EdSTEM, and that we get a little bit of teacher unhappiness because they have to change the system. But I'm confident that with all these three, we cover the functionalities, and that these three could, in a way, continue and sustain the use of forums in education. So this is how Piazza looks. You have statistics about who is doing what, who are your best students, if you want, who is posting the most, how many posts did not get an answer, how long it took to give an answer, etc. And this is how EdSTEM looks. It's a bit more modern in the interface. You also have categories of posts about lectures, labs, and so on. They also have statistics about activity in the forum, etc. So it's a bit bonnet blanc ou blanc bonnet. In the end, it would be easier to manage the introduction of the system if we stayed with Piazza. So as a conclusion to this story, it's really clear the pandemic was a strong catalyst for forum use at EPFL, because the forum usage continues even after the pandemic. And it led us, Elena, Roland, and others to start thinking also about a model for innovation diffusion. We often wonder what makes it work? If you bring a new tool, you know, what are the criteria for which it's adopted? And this leads us a bit to a sort of a model that is the replace, extend, and transform model. So basically, if you want a tool that is adopted, it needs to do exactly what people do without the tool. So that's the replacement model. In the case of the COVID, everyone was forced to replace, but they just wanted to ask questions and give answers. And then in a second step, these tools often have new functionalities that extend a bit the possibilities of what you do. For example, in Piazza, you can add a little poll where you can ask questions, ask the opinion of students, and maybe down the road, you will transform your teaching and maybe, let's say, have a more active approach to a more interactive approach to teaching. And so we'll see a bit if Piazza is adopted more or another discussion forum is adopted more. 3 years down the road, we'll be able to see if people do more than just question and answers with those type of tools. So the next steps are the call for tender to document best practices. I think there is a lot to be learned in comparing the different forums, which ones worked well in terms of have a high degree of elaboration, a high degree of participation from the students, and then also the idea to increase the use across sections, which means move the good experience of CS and math courses to the other types of courses. So this is it for my presentation, and I'm happy to take some questions.